Hello. I'd like to start off this message with an issue about, is it about the church or is it about the people? Is it about the church or is it about Jesus Christ? Is there a hidden agenda here? Is there a hidden message? Churches tend to say that it's about social justice and about human rights. It's about freeing people from injustice, seeing the sick healed, anger changed to joy. But what I don't understand is, I just heard with statistics that, say for instance, Werribee has 160,000 people living in it. And there's all these churches that are around the place. And there's a concentration on church planting and stuff like this. But in the Bible it states that there are few to do the harvest. There are few to do the work. And I think the question comes down to it is that, do we just dismiss the injustices that the church does to people? They close the door on people that are disadvantaged. They close the door on people that just don't fit in, or they have a disability, or they're outspoken. Well, Jesus was outspoken and he was crucified for it. So the question is that can the churches of Werribee, can the churches right around Australia bring more people in? What are we not doing to bring the people in? Why are we full of excuses? Are we doers for God, or do we just keep talking? And talking is just words. In Isaiah 53 it talks about who has believed our message, and whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed. He grew up to before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in appearance that we should desire him. He was despised, rejected by man, and man of sorrow and familiar suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteem him not. Surely he took up the infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we consider the stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he who was pierced for our transgressions, he who was crushed for our iniquities, the punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we were healed. We're all like sheep have gone astray, and each of us has turned to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquities of all of us, the iniquities of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted. So this is Isaiah 53 verses 7. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and a sheep before the shearers is silent. So he did not open his mouth. Verses 8, by oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who could speak for his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of the people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it is the Lord's will to crush him. Yet it was the Lord's will. So yet it was the Lord's will in verses 10 of Isaiah 53 to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offsprings prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hands. After suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life, and be satisfied by the knowledge my righteous servant will justify many. And he will bear their iniquities, and therefore I will give him portions among the great. And I will divide the spoils with the strong, because he has poured out his life unto death. For he has bore the sin of many, and made the intercessions for the transgressors. I want to go back for a minute, and in Isaiah 53, it talks about, and therefore I will give a portion among the great, and I will divide the spoils and strong, because they poured out his life unto death. For it was numbered was transgression, for he bore the sin of many, and made intercessions for the transgressors. After the suffering, in Isaiah 53:11, after the suffering of the soul, he will see the light of life, and be satisfied in the knowledge of righteousness. Servants will justify many. He will bear their iniquities. This talking about the fact that what comes up to me is that I had a pastor say, what about the damage to the church? Where's the justification here? And the righteousness and the glory of God, and to justify, well, you can have the church do damage to people that are suffering, people that have disabilities, people that are downtrodden, people that are oppressed in society. It's okay for the church to do this to these people. But if the people do it to the church, then the church is screaming out and saying, you are damaging this church. You're being a troublemaker. But Jesus Christ commands us to yell out from the rooftops of injustices. He commands us to look after the poor, to bandage up the wounds of the wounded, bandage up the wounds and heal the poor and help the poor, feed the poor, and all this. But at the end of the day, Jesus also says, the church is just a building. It is not the people. So to have a church, you need people. And to have people, you obviously need the people to be believing in what? In Jesus Christ, the glory for God. So if you have as this pastor was talking about, kingdom building, going out from the kingdom and going out and doing different tasks, bringing in a harvest for God, seeing souls saved for Jesus Christ, and not just building an empire. Could the question be that in a sense the Salvation Army is seen to be helping the poor, but on a different level? But what about the truth? The truth is that I don't represent the Salvation Army. I'm not a Salvation Army soldier. And I'm certainly nothing to the Salvation Army, except I was married in the Salvation Army. Jesus Christ, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. And a sheep before her shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. We need to look at the fact that what do we see the church as? If we all turn our Bibles to Matthew 6. So if we all turn our Bibles to Matthew 6. So in Matthew 6 we see this. Jesus is teaching about giving to the needy. Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men, be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward for your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as hypocrites do in the synagogues on the streets. To be honoured by men, I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father sees what is done in secret rewards you. So when we're looking at Matthew 6 verses 2, the term hypocrite is used here to describe people who do good acts for the appearance only, not out of compassion or other good motives. Their actions may be good, but their motives are hollow. These are empty acts only reward, but God will reward those who are sincere in their faith. It's stepping out in faith. So while watching a pre-game football show on Thanksgiving, I heard about a fantastic play for New Orleans Saints. On the very first play of their very first game, they returned the punt nearly length of the football field to score their very first touchdown. The player only had one thing in mind, and that was running downfield. That was across the goal line. All champions are like that. Charles Lindbergh made the first solo flight across the Atlantic because of the concentrated on one thing. Thomas Edison seldom slept at night, spending long hours in his laboratory, perfecting hundreds of inventions. The list could go on. The key of being success anytime, anything, is to put first in your life. So the key to be a Christian is to put Jesus Christ first in your life. In the text of the morning, Jesus instructs those who believe in him to focus on the necessary to be success as Christians, not material things, but to seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Number one, many people put other things first. Some will put their jobs and professions first. One, think that is important for a Christian to be a good worker. Two, regardless of whether they believe work or employee ought to be able to see the difference in them. If you are a businessman and you ought to work and how much business success, but never allow your job or your business to come first in your life. Example, Del Lewis, Gabers and others. B, some will put accumulations of wealth first. Many spend their time, energies in gaining and getting, but they often lose the sense of God. The more we seek everything less than think of God, we can see. So the more we seek of earthly things, the less we can see the things of God. So if we're seeking more earthly things, we are going to see less of God. If we're seeking God, praying and reading the Bible and seeking God, then we're going to see more of God. One famous singer who had risen to the top gave it all up when she asked to point at the beautiful sunset and replied, "My success was made to think less of what it had made me, think little nothing but God's words." Some people put pleasure first. Some people put their families first. Some people put their families first. What does it mean to seek the kingdom? Putting God first in our lives means that we can conform our lives to his principles. Romans 12:2 tells us to be not conformed to this world. So if we all go to Romans 2. Romans 12. Sorry, not Romans 2. Why am I saying going to Romans 2? Okay, so we're going to Romans 2 for a minute. Romans 2 verses 1, you therefore have no excuse. You who pass judgment on someone else for at whatever point you judge the other, you are condemning yourself because you pass judgment and do the same things. Now, in verses 2 of Romans 2, now we know that God's judgment is against those who do such thing is based on truth. 3, so when you mere man pass judgment on them and yet do the same thing, do you think you will escape God's judgment? Verses 4, or do you show contempt for the riches of the kindness and tolerance and patience, not realizing that God's kindness leads you towards repentance? I'm going to go there and leave it there, part 2, just in a minute, and we'll stick to Romans 2 just in a minute.